What you see on the screen now are senior Iranian military officials showing off one of many underground missile cities, huge facilities where their massive weapons arsenals are protected by natural barriers. They are built underneath mountains. Some of these sites are believed to be impervious to even the most powerful bombs in the world, American bunker busters. In recent days, videos like this one have been released by the Islamic Republic of Iran, clearly flexing its power, both for domestic morale and to show its enemies everywhere that it remains a force to be reckoned with. In today's discussion, State of Tel Aviv and Beyond regular, Katz and I get into this wild moment in which we find ourselves. We recorded this podcast on Wednesday night. And if we look a little tired, that's because we are. No one in Israel slept on Tuesday night. Moments before the ceasefire was announced between America and Iran, the IRGC launched waves of missiles directed at Israel, and they entered our airspace staggered over several hours, meaning that alarms and sirens kept us up until about 4:30 a.m. on Wednesday morning. Yaakov and we discuss a lot of things, including what kind of ceasefire is this? What are the terms? Who is America negotiating with? Who is winning this war? Anyone? And in the last few minutes, we discuss the conduct of Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and his coalition government. On the eve of Passover, they threw another 800 million shekels. That's about 260 million US dollars. And for my Canadian friends, I'm sorry to say that's 360 million Canadian dollars. That money was given to the ultra-orthodox constituency in Israel. I mean, Yaakov, quite rightly, is apoplectic. Many Israelis are. I'm Vivian Berkovich, former Canadian ambassador to Israel. Let's do this. Wednesday, April 8th, 9:15 in the evening. Thank you, Yaakov Katz, for joining State of Tel Aviv and Beyond at this late hour and after a sleepless night, no less.
A sleepless night and a long Passover holiday.
Indeed. But after the announcement of the ceasefire, whenever it was, early morning hours here, it was around 1, 2 in the morning. I don't remember. We got a ceasefire, a 14-day ceasefire. Isn't that great? And we were already kind of, mired in successive pre-alarm alarms, right? We in my region of the country never actually got a real siren, but I heard a lot of cluster bombs exploding in the direction of Beersheba. But
and we got one in Jerusalem that I have to say about 1:30, 2 o'clock in the morning. And there's a couple explosions that you hear throughout this war that they stand out. This one, to end the war for now, was one that stood out. And later I saw that it actually was intercepted, but it was a huge bang and really shook the building. It was intercepted not far from where I live and literally relatively close to ground, to surface. So it was a very last minute interception, I'm presuming by Iron Dome in that case. And the video shows that it was very close and we felt it. I mean, it was something else.
Yeah, ours was further away, but the sounds are unmistakable. And not sorry to have a ceasefire. But let's talk about that, Yaakov. It came late in the night. Didn't feel very ceasefire-ish in Israel. Iran made sure to launch many waves of last-minute missiles and cluster bombs to keep us on our toes. But it died down, I think, by around 4:30-ish in the morning. What is the ceasefire?
Well, look, the ceasefire had been spoken about for a long time, and Trump had been trying to get the Iranians to agree to a framework of some sort of talks and then announce a ceasefire. And during the period of that ceasefire, whether it was going to be 2 weeks, 30 days, 45 days, whatever it was, a bunch of different numbers had been thrown around over the last few weeks. This would be the time frame during which they would try to see if they could reach a long-term comprehensive deal that would basically deal with the major outstanding issues pertaining to Iran, the threat that it poses, whether it's the ballistic missiles, the nuclear, the Strait of Hormuz, the oppression of its people, and the laundry list of any other issue that you want to throw into there. Support of proxies, terrorism, etc. What happened here, though, with the ceasefire was that Donald Trump, of course, had constantly been moving the needle or the time frame for when the ultimatum would be up, and it was going to be up at 8 p.m. Eastern,
Right.
which was 3 a.m. for us here in Israel on Wednesday. And if not, as he had tweeted earlier Tuesday, he would be ending a civilization, the Iranian civilization, quite the remark. But then as the night went on, it started to become clear that there were intense talks and it looked like it was going to happen. But here's the issue, right? And I'll say it like this. When you win a war, you know you won a war. And when you have to tell a story to give the list of what you attacked and how many sorties and how many bombs you dropped and how many munition depots you destroyed and how many ballistic missile facilities, threw bombs at and so much more, you might not have won the war. Now, that's a question mark still. And this is exactly what the ceasefire and the negotiations that will apparently be taking place already as early as Friday, maybe in Pakistan. This ceasefire is going to determine whether this is a victory or a loss. Because as of now, facts on the ground, I don't see the victory. I can explain why, but the victory is not yet there. I think that hopefully the deal can get us there across the finish line, but we don't yet have it.
And I'm going to presume that when you say I don't see the victory, you're referring to destruction of all nuclear material that could be turned into some kind of weapon.
Or the removal of the uranium from Iran. Right.
Yeah. You're referring to the degrading of Iran's missile inventory and production capability to the degree that it would no longer pose a threat to Israel or its Middle Eastern neighbors, or in fact Europe, because we know they have missiles that can reach Western Europe. And I would say that the third issue on that list is the opening of the Strait of Hormuz to oil and gas tanker traffic and other commodities passing through. And I'm again going to assume that you are not including regime change.
Well, I'll be honest. I actually am, and I'll tell you why, right?
Okay.
Because when I go back to the beginning of all of this, right, February 28th, when this war began, we were given by Prime Minister Netanyahu and President Trump a very ambitious set of goals that they wanted to achieve, okay? First and foremost was regime change. That was at the top of their list of objectives.
Right.
After that was the complete destruction of all nuclear facilities and nuclear capabilities. And later that was translated into this about roughly half a ton of highly enriched uranium, enriched to about 60%, that remains somewhere under the Isfahan nuclear complex. There was also not just the degradation of the ballistic missile capability, but capping their ability to develop these missiles that can continue to pose a threat against Israel and the other Gulf states in this region. So when I look at that ambitious list, back when it all started, Strait of Hormuz was not there, was never mentioned. And we had these three goals. Now, as of this time that we're speaking on Wednesday evening at about 9:30 in Jerusalem, and you're down in the south, we do not yet have achieved any of those goals, right? Now, if the strait opens, that was a goal that came in later on during the war. And I'm not saying it's not important. It clearly became very important to the Americans, and that's fine. But this was not what the war was about. And so you look at this, you see the regime intact. And I'll say something else, Vivian. I don't want to be sour, because I'm not sour. I think what we achieved is something unbelievable. And we could talk about that. But again, if we're looking just at the dry facts, the regime is intact. It survived 5 weeks of relentless bombings by two of the most powerful militaries. One is the most powerful. The second one is one of the most powerful militaries in the world. Still with air defense capabilities, still with command and control capabilities, still with ballistic missile capabilities, still able to shoot drones and missiles at the regional allies. I'd say if you're, the Iran didn't do so bad, right? They didn't do so bad. Now, they've lost a lot, and as the dust settles, we'll find out much more exactly of what they lost. But is this what this war was supposed to be about? I don't think so, based again on the goals that these two leaders had laid out when they embarked on this epic fury, roaring lion operation back on February 28th.
So, two things I want to ask you about. With respect to Hormuz, I mean, you said, well, it actually even wasn't articulated at the outset as a goal of this war. And that's kind of odd, because what it does suggest is that neither Israel nor America anticipated that it would be weaponized, which seems to be a rather significant oversight. I want to just park that for a moment because I'd like you to address it in conjunction with this other issue, which is how regime change might be accomplished. We've been reading a fair bit about the head of Mossad, David Barnea, providing his assessment prior to February 28, when the war was launched, how regime change might be achieved. And based on what we know publicly, what's open source now, that his opinion was that regime change was absolutely achievable. And again, what this calls into question is how sharp was this intelligence assessment with respect to the, I'm going to use the word ease and possibility of such quick regime change, because they've held on.
Yeah.
It held on through a lot. And one of the things we know, and you and I have discussed previously, is that early on, the security and military apparatus in Iran put into play an operational plan that was to kick in just this kind of emergency. So when you lose your central command, as they did, layer 1, layer 2, layer 3, you immediately go to a decentralized model on the basis of the various provinces, and you continue on. And it seems that's exactly what they did, and that is how they maintained control over the population. Surely, David Barnea was aware of this. And so both of those issues, Hormuz and the assessment of regime change possibilities, got to ask, what was going on? Did we miscalculate gravely?
Well, I mean, let's first of all, it's not over yet, right? In the sense of what we saw in January, which is what apparently moved up Israel's timeline, right? Israel had been thinking that at some time in the summer, after the June 12-day war, it was going to have to act again because Iran had surprised Israel in its ability to speed up manufacturing and production of the ballistic missiles. And Israel was growingly and increasingly concerned. It was also rehabilitating and fixing some of the nuclear sites that had been hit also in June. So Israel was thinking already sometime in the summer it would have to do something, and there were already talks and coordination conversations that were taking place between Jerusalem and Washington on that. But then in January, there was the uprising in Iran.
Mm-hmm.
And, exactly how many people were killed remains a question mark that no one really knows, but anywhere from 7,000 to 30,000 people. But a real nationwide crackdown on all the people, but the protests were everywhere. And this changed things. Then Trump came out with his comment and said, help is on the way. Now, Israel saw this as an opportunity to actually get the Americans on their side. Maybe we could do this jointly together, and to do it maybe earlier. This is how February 28th came to be, essentially. Now, what you're referring to is there have been two reports in the New York Times, right? One of them was a couple weeks ago, which basically said that it was David Barnea's assessment that Donald Trump and his advisors had heard and bought into, that the Mossad was capable of fomenting public uproar and uprising and, could help bring down the regime, and that didn't happen. That report came out a couple weeks ago and was fishy, because what it looked like at the time was someone was trying to find a scapegoat, right? Why is this dragging on? Why are we not seeing the Iranian people take to the streets? Now, there's a lot of reasons I've heard from people. I mean, A, the country's under bombardment. Why would someone want to go out? Number two is right? Maybe it just hasn't been coordinated yet. Who knows? Maybe it still will come, but we have to assume it's not, right? And I think that's better to assume it's not happening than it is happening at this point. But then came out this report yesterday, which is part of a book that Maggie Haberman and Jonathan Swan, two of the leading reporters for the New York Times, are coming out, called Regime Change, which will be coming out sometime in the next couple months. And in there, this excerpt from the book, which really is unbelievably, a huge coup by these two reporters to get this, is basically what happened in that February 11th visit by Netanyahu to Washington, D.C., where he comes to meet Trump and is taken down to the Situation Room, and there presents the president with a lecture of about an hour explaining how this is in a moment, we can do this, we should do this together, et cetera, et cetera. And David Barnea has put on a screen behind him. And also they again give this spiel about how they can get the people to rise up and they can help, topple the regime. What the story then goes on to tell, though, what's interesting is that was that February 11th, February 12th, when Bibi was no longer there, the president met with his national security team. And both Marco Rubio and John Ratcliffe, the CIA director, said that this idea of regime change it's overreaching by Israel. Not going to happen. And Trump still made his decision. So, are all these reports, what has me a little concerned is it seems that this is lining up somebody to drop it on, whether it's Barnea personally or it's Israel generally speaking, that it was Israel that dragged America in. And we hear that conversation going on both sides. So we do have to be careful about that. But look, Israel went into this, obviously, thinking about regime change. Regime change, by the way, it's not new from this war. Already in June, Israel Katz, the defense minister, started to speak openly about regime change because it was going so well at the time. And then Trump stopped us, right? So the war came to an end back in June. But Israel has been flirting with this regime change idea for a long time. I think we've learned something very humbling, maybe over the last 5.5 weeks now. We're very strong. We have really superior military capabilities and, F-35s, and we can create superiority over Iranian airspace. But we're a country of 10 million people, and they're a country of 90 plus million people. And they are huge as a country, as the size compared to what we are. No, we can't just say we want to do regime change and it's going to happen. And we probably learned that lesson now over the last few weeks.
It's interesting, the sort of suggestion that you raise, which has been quite prominent in terms of looking for a scapegoat, someone to hang this war on in America. Hey, if just in case they don't, kind of achieve whatever their goals are, because they do change, we might be able to kind of just pin this one on Israel. They oversold us, as we've read, the Barnea thing. And I don't think that anyone in America particularly cares so much about David Barnea as much as let's nail Israel with this. And it may even be coming from within Trump's camp, because this has created a bit of a colossal political issue for him with gas prices, with upcoming midterms, and other tensions in his party. Let's go back last week, too, because I think that it would just be a shame to overlook this. So much drama. Friday, we have 2 pilots in different aircraft who have been shot down. I believe one in the Persian Gulf, ejected into the Persian Gulf, and the other ejected into a very mountainous region of Iran. He was the weapons officer. The pilot parachuted out, ejected a few seconds earlier, and was rescued pretty quickly within a few hours. The weapons officer seems to have ejected and fallen into some kind of mountain range or a mountain deep inside Iran. He was injured. I don't know much about his injuries. Maybe you do. But it's just an incredible story that he scales a 7,000-foot mountain, finds a crevice in which to kind of shelter and lodge himself, activates some super sci-fi beeper technology, after I think it was 10 hours or 12 hours to let his colleagues know that he's alive and not in enemy hands. And he is rescued 48 hours later. And the other airman who had fallen into the Persian Gulf was also rescued. And the story of the rescue and the planes coming in and getting bogged down in the sand and oh my God, and then sending in follow-ups and then blowing up their own planes. Incredible story. It'll be an incredible movie. And it was also a high for President Trump. There were those 2 days when he just blacked out, canceled a press conference, and was like all of us, I'm sure, on tenterhooks. What's going to happen with these guys? Then this incredible story about the rescue, and he just milked it. He was so enthusiastic, and understandably so. It was followed within days by these 2 rather bizarre social media posts. One saying, all right, guys, either you capitulate and give in to all our demands and open the strait, or tomorrow is bridges and power plants day, I think, and we're going to blow everything up. And then that was followed up a day later by oh, and by the way, we're going to destroy civilization. And it was just so head spinning. I can't help but look at all of that, the highs, the lows. By the time that second message was out, President Trump was in a real pickle. He had really boxed himself into a corner he just didn't need to be in.
For sure. I mean, look, the war dragged on much longer than Donald Trump wanted it to. And I think that became painfully obvious over the last couple of weeks as he was looking for some way to end this. But, when you mentioned the story of the F-15 that got shot down and the 2, the pilot and the weapons officer, the pilot was rescued at night. Flying at night is always going to be safer than flying during the day. But the weapons officer, America was flying aircraft in the middle of the day over Iran, sustaining gunfire, coming under attack, and they managed to rescue this guy. I mean, to me, that story actually is not only is it, probably someone out there is buying the option on this film, right? For sure. I can already see Tom Cruise, being auditioned for, another Top Gun. But it really shows the power of what America and Israel achieved here to an extent because of the ability to operate there almost freely in an enemy country, to fly for hours, to rescue someone, to get a needle out of a haystack, to do this in such a way does show what the success of this war was to a large extent. And, any conversation about that's why I really say it's a mixed bag. Because on the one hand, there are real accomplishments, right? I mean, Israel and America together, they didn't get every last missile. And you and I know this from previous wars and previous operations. The bad guys are always going to fire missiles till the very last second.
Right.
And they're going to hit. And that's how they show we're still here. We survived. Okay, we know. We got that. But Israel in this war, in comparison, in contrast to June, took out not just the stockpiles of what it could get to or the launchers, but also the defense industrial base, the production line of the missiles as well. They cannot produce missiles today, right? We took out their air defenses. Their Navy has been destroyed. The decapitation effort, their top leadership has been removed. They have new leaders. This is true. But those leaders are now gone. Nuclear scientists are gone. I mean, there is tremendous damage to Iran's military capabilities. So, you and I here in Israel will be able to sleep better today. And definitely for the next probably few months, if not even longer. But the issue is that if the deal, like we started, if the deal doesn't deal with those big 3, capping the missiles, nuclear enriched material, and the Strait of Hormuz, this is only a matter of time that we're going to be back in this. And is it going to be 8 months or 12 months or 18 months next time? I mean, I don't know. And none of us can know at this point, but it's going to have to happen again. But I just want to say one last thing, because I think this is also important. This war is the epitome of the lesson of October 7th, right? And to me, it's important to keep that in mind. What was the lesson of October 7th, at least from my perspective, was that we cannot allow enemies to obtain capabilities and then try to guess what their intentions will be once they have those capabilities, right? So that's what we did with Hamas for years. That's what we did with Hezbollah for years. We knew that they had these impressive capabilities. We knew they had weapons, but we said to ourselves, you know what? We don't think that they have any intention to use them. We don't think they want war, so we don't have to go to war. The lesson of October 7th is you have to stop them from getting the capabilities. And that is why Israel went to this war. It went to this war to stop Iran from getting its hands on thousands of more ballistic missiles, many more than the ones that were already fired at us. It went to this war to stop Iran from crossing the threshold of becoming a nuclear power. It hasn't fully been achieved yet, but that's why it went to this war. Those are good reasons to go to war. And to me, that shows that at least this, for now, this prime minister, this government, have internalized the core lesson of their greatest failure, which took place 2.5 years ago.
What about the underground, completely, totally fortified missile city that we've been seeing videos about for the last few days in particular in Iran? I have to say, the first one I watched, I thought, is it AI? I don't know. I'll send it to you after, you can tell me. But you know what I'm talking about. There is supposed to be this huge missile complex, wildly sophisticated, dug and embedded deep, deep below a granite mountain where missiles are stored and waiting to be used. So you said that, well, we've disrupted their production capability. What about the missile city?
Yeah, no. So there are facilities that Israel and America have both admitted that they were not necessarily able to penetrate. When Israel spoke, for example, and you and I have spoken about this in the past, about the numbers of launchers that they've, eliminated. Right. Some of them they know that have been destroyed because they have footage of, drones or dropping a missile or a fighter jet dropping a missile on an actual mobile launcher. But a lot of them are also ones that are buried inside some of these underground missile cities because we destroyed the entrances to those facilities. They will be able to dig those out. And over the last couple of weeks, there have been reports that they were already succeeding in digging some of them out. And that's how they were able to keep up their missile fire. Not everything was able, Israel and America were not able to get to everything. Iran has learned over the years that its best way to survive is to harden and fortify. It did that with Natanz. It did that with Fordo near Qom. It did that with this new facility, which is yet to be up and running, called Pickaxe Mountain. And it's done that also with the missile cities. This is why Israel doesn't have the capabilities to necessarily penetrate these facilities like America does with the B-52s and the B-2 bombers and the GBU-57s, which are those really huge bunker busters that America has used. But my presumption always is, whatever we think we destroyed, they probably have a little more than we think.
Who are we negotiating with? You mentioned, we're going to see what happens in these negotiations and with new leaders. And Trump has kind of vaguely, referred to these leaders who are nameless and faceless, but tells us they're much more moderate and reasonable to negotiate with. Any idea who we're negotiating with?
I think we all have to learn how to read Donald Trump. When I was a young boy in Jewish day school in Chicago, right? So we would learn Chumash, right? Learning the Torah. And you had Rashi, right? The commentator. And then you would read a verse, and then you would read what Rashi says on the verse. Donald Trump tweets these things out. This is a great leadership. They're amazing. They're moderate. This is the new government of Iran. You got to look at it and say, okay, what he likes to do, I always find, is he wants to will reality based on what he says. Like, these guys are not moderates. They're not good people. Look, there's 3 different groups in Iran right now that I know of from hearing about them from the Israelis, right? One of them is the IRGC. Some of the leaders have been killed. They are, have taken more control over the regime. The second group is the president, is the foreign minister. They are believed to be a little more moderate. Arakshi, as the foreign minister, is one of the people that they have been talking to. There's been reports of Steve Witkoff, the special envoy to the president, who's been texting directly with Arakshi. So they're, WhatsApp or SMS buddies. And then there is Mojtaba Khamenei, the son of Ali Khamenei, this new supreme leader, who's wounded, who's injured. There have been reports that it was him who was involved in these talks and was actually sending couriers with handwritten notes back and forth. So somehow he is functioning. And he is apparently surrounded by some of the remaining advisors to his father, who are no less extreme, and these are not, moderate people. Clearly, they wanted a deal, right? And that's how we got to the ceasefire. And this goes against everything that they said they would do, because the Iranians said, let's remember, no ceasefire, a complete cessation to the war. That is the only thing that we're willing to do, right? What's interesting and why it's all, I think, confusing is because the Iranians came out with this 10-point plan, right? This is what we want. We want compensation. We want to charge every boat that goes through the Strait of Hormuz. We want this, that, and the other. America has its 15-point plan, right? So now the White House just said a couple hours ago that the 10-point plan that came out is not really the 10-point plan that they know. They have a different 10-point plan, right? Then there's the Iranian parliament speaker. I definitely don't know who they're exactly is the guy that they're negotiating with. I don't know that person wants necessarily to be known and whether that will be good for that person. But we will see what happens if there's going to be direct negotiations, potentially in Islamabad, in Pakistan, as early as this weekend. Who is the Iranian who's going to be coming to those talks? And who's the American, by the way, who's going to be coming to those talks? Is it J.D. Vance, who was also key to these talks, the vice president who was really very hesitant and wary of this war to begin with, and apparently bought some credibility with the Iranians because of his resistance. I don't want to call it opposition, but him being colder on the issue than, let's say, Witkoff or Jared Kushner, for that matter. But I mean, that'll be interesting also to see who the Americans send.
Yaakov, before I let you go, I hope that actually there is a real person, this Waldo, this mysterious character who may or may not exist.
Yeah.
There may be a process ongoing that'll kind of decide who wins the prize, a bit of a Hunger Games thing. But let's park Iran. And before I let you go, I really need to ask you to share with us some of the thoughts. I'm going to include, of course, in the podcast notes, the really excellent op-ed piece that you had published last Friday in the Jerusalem Post, and where you spoke about some of the domestic shenanigans that have been ongoing and not quite as remarked upon in Israel even as they should be, while we're distracted by just kind of trying to survive and keep our families going throughout this very difficult period. You wrote about Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu making a magnanimous gift of an additional 800 million shekels to the ultra-orthodox on the eve of the Passover holiday. And this money is to go to fund yeshiva education. And you also commented on the latitude that the Minister of National Security, Itamar Ben-Gvir, seems to be enjoying with respect to not clamping down on what can only be described as Jewish terrorism in Judea and Samaria, the West Bank. So distill it how you wish, but leave us with your thoughts on it, because it was just fantastic what you wrote.
I appreciate it. I mean, we live in such a roller coaster world, right? But last week, right before Passover, they passed the budget.
Right.
And basically what that does is it gives Netanyahu the ability, if, had he not passed the budget by the end of March, he would have been potentially, the government would have fallen. They would have gone to an election earlier in June. He now will decide when he wants to go to an election, but he can carry on until October. And that's impressive that a government, after so much war and so much instability, is really still here surviving. But one of the ways they did that was by buying off the Haredim, the ultra-Orthodox, with another 800 million shekel. This is after they had given them 5 billion shekel just a couple weeks earlier. And to me, it's just mind-blowing, Vivian. I mean, I feel sick sometimes when I think about this because, and I wrote it just really from the heart. I was thinking of nephews of mine, of friends of mine who are in Lebanon as we speak, right? And it's fucking cold, and it's dirty, and it's wet, and they're hungry, and it's Passover, and they're eating shit. I mean, pardon my language, right? And it's and they're fighting, and they're dying, and some of them are getting killed, and they're getting wounded. I just read about a deputy battalion commander who lost a leg from an anti-tank missile. I mean, and they're there, and then they pick up a phone, or they get a letter, or whatever it is, however they get their news, and they look and they see that, well, they're there fighting, risking their lives, and they're doing it because they want to, because they know they need to, because there are people in northern Israel who are under missile attack, and there's no one else to go, so they go. And then they hear that 800 million shekel isn't going into them. It's not going to their wives, or their spouses, or their husbands, or their kids who are back home, who are out of school. It's not going to them because they're losing their jobs or their businesses are going under because they're already doing their, 600th day of miluim, of reserve service since October 7th. It's going to the Haredim who don't serve, who aren't there with them. The pilots who are flying multiple sorties a day to Iran, 2 hours each way, risking their lives, right? I mean, the pressure, the focus, we just spoke about American airmen shot down. Okay. Thank God we didn't have that, but it could have happened at any moment. Yeah. Right. And they're there, and 5 billion shekel are going to the Haredim. It just blows my mind. And I mean, listen, I understand that Netanyahu needs partners and he's got to buy votes, and that's the way it goes. But this is absurd. The fact that we allowed this to happen is absurd. And then you go to the West Bank. And you see what's going on there. And it is Jewish terrorism. It's been Jewish terrorism for years. By the way, I for years have been writing about this. And I for years have said I'm against the term settler violence, because it's not the settlers, 500,000 of these people who live in the West Bank. Yeah. 99.9% of them are good people, right? But there is a group that are terrorists, and we are not stopping them. And there's no way to explain this. There's no Hasbara trick. There's nothing you can pull out and say, no, this is evil and it should stop right now. And why doesn't it stop? Why? Because there are ministers in the government who, I don't know if they want it, but they don't mind it. And they're allowing it to happen. And that's Ben-Gvir, and that's Smotrich, and that's other people. And that's a stain on all of us. So, I look at all this and we could get upset. I could be upset at the Haredim, and I could be upset at Bibi, and I could be upset at Ben-Gvir, and I could be upset at all these people. But you know what? If I want to choose someone to be upset at, I'm upset at us, the people who allow this to continue, right? We have to change this. This has to change. And the way it changes is in elections, right? Israelis have to decide they want something different. And if they don't, then that's the way they decide. But it's not going to change on its own. Israelis have to make a conscious decision. Enough is enough, when we want something different for our future.
And we'll be talking about this a lot going forward, but you did in your piece mention the fact that a place like Kiryat Shmona that is just being bombarded, a town of 24,000 people that only has 16,000 residents now who have returned, and it is a Likud stronghold. And so, these mysteries are ongoing, and it will be interesting to see if and how the Likud vote and the Ben-Gvir vote holds up in these places.
I wonder, because 75% of them voted for the coalition parties in the last election.
Yeah.
How will they vote in this coming election? My heart goes out to the people of Kiryat Shmona. They've lost 8,000 residents.
Yeah.
Right? They're being bombarded. There's no one's coming. They don't have an emergency room, right? I mean, they don't have basic necessities. Netanyahu has promised them trains every election over the last 15 years. You're going to get a train to Tel Aviv. You're going to get a university. It never gets built. But, are they to blame? Of course, they're not to blame. They're the victims. However, if they again vote overwhelmingly for these same parties, the parties that they keep voting for, they keep lying to them, it's going to sound horrible, but should we feel bad for them? If they're asking for it. I mean, if somebody lets you down every single time and you keep going back to that same person,
right?
You think it's going to change? Come on. So, again, my heart breaks at what they're going through.
Yeah.
But to some extent, they are also to blame for their own situation, because they keep voting for these same people. So that's why it's us, the people, who have to want something different.
Let's go up and do a field trip and talk to the streeters.
Let's do it.
I'm totally down. I think it'd be fascinating. Yaakov, thank you so much. Always wonderful to talk to you and hear your thoughts. And I wish you a peaceful night.
You too. Thanks, Vivia.
And thanks to you, our listeners, for being here. There is a link in the show notes to Yaakov's superb and important op-ed piece that ran in the Jerusalem Post last Friday. I urge you to read it. It's been a quiet day today, Thursday, in southern and central Israel so far. This is the first full day of the ceasefire. But in the north, Hezbollah continues to hammer the north. And it seems that the whole Lebanon-Hezbollah issue was not really addressed in the terms, whatever they are, for this ceasefire. So I want to just shift gears and leave you with something a little lighter and just for fun. I mean, this passes for fun in these parts these days. I thought I'd share with you this animation GIF that a friend sent to me earlier today. Have a look. It's just a few seconds. If you've not already done so, please consider supporting our work with a premium subscription at stateoftelaviv.com, or you can make a contribution at Buy Me a Coffee. We will be restricting access to much of our work beginning next week. During wartime, I tend to open things up, but all good things must end. We need your support to deliver the goods and keep the lights on. We love hearing from you. So please comment on our website, stateoftelaviv.com, or send us a note to Vivian@stateoftelaviv.com. That's VIVIAN@stateoftelaviv.com. And if you go to our website, stateoftelaviv.com, you can find the subscribe button and take it from there. Hope that you do that. On behalf of the State of Tel Aviv core team, Jan Zabo, our creative, graphic, visual, and marketing man, Amir White, producer and editor extraordinaire, sound guy, who is also impressively patient with me and my boomer tech deficiencies, and our social media manager who pitches in on everything. Thank you, Maya Naftalin. Thanks to the team, and thank you, listeners, for being here. Until next time, stay safe.